Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. As we begin our worship service together, I do want to just start with a couple announcements. The first is that while we are still in the midst of a global pandemic, there are now two pens on the pulpit, and I grabbed the wrong one. That's new. While we are in the midst of a global pandemic, we are asking that everybody keep your masks on during worship. And when hymns play, it's very hard not to sing along with hymns in this room, but we are going to ask that for now, if you are moved to sing along with the hymns, that you instead hum as a way to keep down aerosol spread. Next week, we will be at full capacity for our first time since last March. We are going to ask that you continue to register in advance to come, but you'll see if you come in, next week we will have all 150 chairs in this room. Right now there are 75. So if you are watching at home or here, know that starting tomorrow, or starting next week, you can decide at 9:30 on Sunday morning that this is a morning that you want to come to church. Or you can decide at 9:30 that morning that this is a morning that you'd really rather stay in your pajamas and watch on YouTube. The other announcement is that we have a pandemic memory project out in the gallery. We're asking that people fill out these little cards with memories from the last year that we were apart. We'll integrate those into a whole in the fall when we do water communion. And as a last note, it is a blessing to not preach every week. And it is particularly a blessing to welcome Christine Davis to be our first worship associate back in this space. I am preaching this week, but elsewhere. I am preaching in about 17 minutes at the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock. That's pre-recorded, so I'll be running the live stream here while preaching there, but that does mean that I will be booking it out of this room to go participate in their Zoom coffee hour immediately following this service. So if you see me not engage and run out that way, it's because this service has run a little long and I told them I would be there at 11. All right. Thus ends the announcements, and thus begins our worship. So we begin, as we do each week, with music.
Spirit of God, we are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Another new thing. Into this home, we bring our hunger for awakening. We bring our compassionate hearts and a will toward justice. Into this home, we bring the courage to walk on after hard losses. Into this home, we bring our joy and gratitude for ordinary blessings. By our gathering, we bless this place. In its shelter, we know ourselves blessed. Words of Kathleen McTeague. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. I am Christine Davis, a worship associate. It is good to be with all of you here and those of you who are online, including someone in particular I'd like to welcome. Hi, Mom. Technology, with all its shortcomings, makes many wonderful things possible. I am joined in the chancel this morning by my worship associate, Reverend Oscar Sinclair. The Unitarian Church of Lincoln aspires to be a loving community, uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and the world. We have a big vision here, and we know that creating a loving community begins with welcome. So, whether this is your first time here or your 500th, if you come here hopeful or heartbroken, whatever your age, gender, skin color, whomever you love, you are welcome here. We are about the work of transformation, and it is hard to transform the world without telling the world what we're about. So, after the service, if it is your practice, please share what brought you here and what you find. Now, as we enter into worship, take a moment to center yourself in this place. Find a comfortable place with your body, wherever you are. Take a few deep breaths. And let us begin.
Our story today is called No Small Potatoes. 1 potato, 2 potato, 30, 11 million potatoes? No, not 30, 11 million. Not exactly. But Junius G, he sure grew piles and piles of spuds. When baby Junius G first laid eyes on the world, he had nothing to call his own. Legally, not even himself. He was born as a person who was enslaved on a plantation near Greensburg, Kentucky. Thank goodness Junius G didn't stay enslaved for a long, long time. He was young when freedom came in the form of a new law that said enslaved people in the South were free for the first time to start new lives. As he grew into a man, he worked for different planters and managed to pick up a little reading and math in a log schoolhouse in Kentucky. But the better that things got, the worse they got. White people refused to accept Junius G and all the people they had enslaved as equals. In 1879, when he was about 20, he left Kentucky, part of a great going out and going away to a place called Kansas. Exodusters, they were called. With hearts hugging hope, clutching dreams of bountiful lives, free from violence and hatred, 40,000 exodusters journeyed by steamboat, by train, in bumpety ox carts, and wide-wheeled wagons, and settled all along the Kansas River, also known as the Kaw. As for Junius G, he walked more than 500 miles, working odd jobs along the way. It was several weeks before he could get work on a potato farm in the Great Kaw Valley. It was starvation wages at 40 cents a day. But better, he thought, than being forced to beg on the streets. He was a good worker, and his wages rose to 75 cents a day, and then he was named foreman for $1.25 a day. Still, Junius G wanted more. He dreamed of farming for himself. He rented land from the potato farmer a little at a time and kept hoping. Alongside him was Matilda, his hard-working wife. Together, they planted white potatoes on a third of those rented acres. Together, they worked hard, day after day, dawn to dusk. Come true dark, the couple slept away a day's weary in a one-room shack. They only bought needful things. That way they could save up every spare dollar, dime, nickel, and penny. All that working and saving paid off. In 6 years, they had saved $2,200 and had their eye on 80 acres of land near the mouth of the Kaw, its banks lined with cottonwoods. It cost $3,600. Where would the $1,400 come from? The wind, a cloud, some magic tree? Well, Junius G knew. He handed over all their money and promised to pay the rest in 1 year. Negative natterings of naysayer neighbors snaked their way to Junius G's ears. He did a dumb deal, these people humphed. He would never pay off that debt in a year, they tut-tutted. And when they looked into Junius G's future, those naysaying neighbors say nothing but failure. The negative natterings kicked up a ruckus in Junius G's head, made him sad, scared, down, discouraged. It wasn't like he had only himself to worry about. There was Matilda E. What's more, the couple had 3 young sons by then, Charles, Walter, and Fred, stair-step kids. Maybe those neighbors were right, feared Junius G. Mauve and him had dreamed too big, bitten off more than they could chew. What to do? Keep working hard. Planting, plowing, tilling, hilling, hoping for rain, watching potato vines grow, then waiting for their blooms. They had to keep their courage up under searing sun and hot, heavy winds. In a year's time, they paid off the money they owed. The land was their own. In time, Junius G bought more land in the Great Kaw Valley. He was named the Potato King of Wyandotte County in Kansas, and then the Potato King of the whole state, and finally, in 1902, the Potato King of the world. He had grown 12,000 more bushels of potatoes than anyone else in the world. How many potatoes is that? About 12 million potatoes. Junius G's spuds filled bellies around America, and those potatoes traveled by train to Canada and Mexico. And while all those spuds grew year after year, so did Charles, Walter, Fred, Ora, Ida Mae, Lillian, Junius G. Jr., Sylvester, Etna, John, Cornelius, and Theodore, the children of Matilda and Junius G. They grew up on the farm and learned the land, potatoes and carrots, cabbage and corn and fruit trees too. And they grew more than that. They grew jobs, hiring farmhands, and a park, Groves Park, and a store that sold groceries and other goods, and a church. They grew a whole cozy community named Groves Center, Kansas. And dawn to dusk, on any given day, winter, spring, summer, fall, Junius G, the Potato King, could behold his Kaw Valley kingdom along with his family. And that is the end of their story.
I guess I don't have to announce the hymn because you don't have hymnals.
We'll just start it.
Go ahead, Bob. The reading this morning is by Christine Slocum, Exhaling in Community. Remember when we used to breathe all over each other? The virus changed how we understood the consequences of breathing. I used to breathe without thinking. If I was breathing mindfully, it was in the context of meditation or yoga. Breath was life force, or a tool of centering oneself. Now we know the way we take up space includes where our breath goes. I miss the innocence about how we existed in each other's presence. I miss the ease and lack of caution. What I understood to be true, the safety I perceived, was because I did not have the complete perspective, or to use another word, the complete story. Committing to right relationship means being willing to revise our practices when we learn that previously accepted habits, even habits of thought, might be harmful. It's true of the language we use and the ways we practice power. May I recognize this awareness as a gift and use it to express care for the people around me. May we each embrace new understandings of how to be in right relationship to each other, even when we don't like what we learn.
Each week, as part of our time together, we set aside time to share the joys and sorrows of our lives. And we do this because, whether in person or on a live stream, we know that we are in community with each other. That what matters to one of us matters to all of us. That what happens to one of us in some ways happens to all of us. And so we gather, and we share our sorrows, and we share our joys. When we do this when we are in person, we speak names of those that we are carrying in joy or silence into this shared space. When we gather online, we type names into this shared chat box. When we are in this season, where there are folks here in the room and folks here on the live chat, we do both. So in a moment, I will ask you to share the names of those you are carrying in sorrow this morning. As you speak them here, I will speak them into the mic so that folks watching from home can hear, and then I will speak the names that they've typed in the live chat. What are the names that we are carrying in sorrow this morning? Wendy.
Pat and Julie.
Pat and Julie.
Paul Johnsgard.
Paul Johnsgard, who passed away 2 days ago.
Jean Helms.
Jean Helms and
Suzanne and Wendy.
Suzanne and Wendy.
Raven.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Raven.
Ravy?
Raven.
Raven, thank you.
The victims of way too many mass shootings.
The victims of way too many mass shootings. And I'll add Emily. And Aaron. Linda and Sonia. And Dana. Sorrow is not the only story. Our lives are also joyful, even playful. What are the names or the moments that we are carrying in joy this morning?
Patrick and Celeste.
Patrick and Celeste.
Monica.
Monica. In the chat, Karen Hafer writes, the joy of celebrating this week the wedding anniversaries of Bailey and Will and their spouses, Mark and Simone.
Wheeler family coming from Africa.
The Wheeler family,
Coming from Africa.
coming from Africa. Joy of Meredith and Bobby, also Carter. And I will add the joy of taking a 3-year-old to the zoo yesterday. And Quinn. Now, as this next song plays, you're invited to hold those names, or names unspoken but no less deeply felt, in your hearts, as we pause for music.
Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe in, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
I'm going to sneak in one more joy. Last year I had, I think, 3 milkweed plants in my yard, and I mowed carefully around them. This year I have 17. And when I was working in my garden this week, I saw a monarch butterfly appear. And I thought, is that actually a monarch butterfly? I don't know. Could she think these milkweed plants are worth visiting? Yes, she could. And I watched her visit every single one, go on the underside of the leaf. I could see her little abdomen go up. I assume laying eggs on the milkweed plants. Doesn't get any better than that. I chose the hymn Give Thanks to follow Chelsea's reading of No Small Potatoes, in part because it resonates with the story of Junius G. Groves. He was, after all, a prodigious farmer. There's no mention of potatoes in the hymn, of course, and there are other signs that the words in this song didn't anticipate a farmer who looked like him, with origins like his. The original words were written in 1904, a scant 2 years after he was named Potato King of the World. I wish I knew the original words to that hymn. I did try to find them, and the author, unfortunately, is listed as anonymous, another dead end. It turns out not everything can be found on the internet. I do know the words were recast, though, in 1955 and again in 1989, so presumably attempts were made to bring them into some sort of alignment with our liberal faith. What are we to make of its ending? For our country, extending from sea unto sea, for ways that have made it a land for the free. This year, especially, it is hard for me to sit comfortably with these lines. But for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, how can those words have ever felt comfortable at any time after their penning in 1902, with our history of colonization and genocide, enslavement and internment? For a majority white congregation like ours, words like these are one of the ways we demonstrate our neutrality, if not our connectedness, to our white ancestors. the songwriters, the poets, the novelists, the historians, the politicians, screenwriters, scientists, teachers, eugenicists, philosophers, theologians, laborers, and enslavers. Yes, I consider all of them my ancestors, with a capital A, my people, try as I might to claim otherwise. Why? I followed after them. I live on land from which they exiled and tried to extinguish hundreds of sovereign nations, breaking every treaty we as a nation promised to abide by. I live and prosper in a country that governs and offers education in buildings white people before me erected at the expense of enslaved African Americans. Like most of you, I electrify and plumb my life with utilities planted by white-run municipalities, like those all over the nation, who counted the health of Black and brown people as negligible. As a white homeowner, I live as most white people do, in a home the value of which has consistently grown since the GI Bill, when those homes had a protected status. The list is very long. My capital A ancestors gave me all this. I haven't always thought of our nation's forebears as my ancestors. In fact, I used to feel exempt because my father's parents emigrated from Eastern Europe in the early 1900s. Whew. The way it looked to me, I didn't have to claim any accountability for colonization or enslavement. My slate was clean. Of course, my mother's lineage on the North American continent was longer, but they'd come from Canada, landing in northern Michigan. Since I knew the North was populated with good white people, safe again. At this point, Mom is either riveted or mortified. I hope you are riveted, Mom. Recent years and lots of learning have scooted all the woo out of me. In fact, serving on the church's task force for dismantling white supremacy motivated me and my co-members to not only claim and interrogate my identity as a white person, but to begin to claim the ancestors that go with that identity, the good and the bad and the ugly. Thankfully, last fall, work in beloved conversations dashed any impulse on my part to wallow in shame over the many atrocities committed by my ancestors. Instead, I have begun to feel the first stirrings of hope and healing. Some of you may know that tomorrow is the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa race massacre of 1921, which I suppose is not what you expected me to say next, given my reference to hope and healing. It probably won't surprise anyone listening in this room or online to learn that the violence in Tulsa was preceded by an inflammatory story of dubious accuracy about a Black man and a white woman in an elevator. When the massacre ended, 35 city blocks of the Greenwood district, also called Black Wall Street, lay in charred ruins. 1,256 homes were destroyed, their churches, their schools, their hospital, and library. In addition, 800 people were injured, plus an estimated 100 to 300 killed. The search for mass graves continues. The first time I heard about Black Wall Street, my reflexive thought was, that can't be true. I would have heard about that. No, I wouldn't have heard about that. Because like so many other parts of the story of Black lives in this country, it simply wasn't talked about. It took 80 years for a commission to be formed to investigate the massacre and report on its findings in 2001. I also had never heard of the Great Migration until I read Isabel Wilkerson's Warmth of Other Suns. I have so much learning and unlearning to do in order to prepare myself for the marathon that is anti-racist work. The urge to act without understanding what I am acting in response to is strong among my people. It is good to listen, to follow. The Roaring Twenties were a prosperous time, my people have been taught, but never without repercussions for people of color. Their success did not go unnoticed or unanswered. Indeed, during the early 1920s, the Osage murders occurred in adjacent Osage County, Oklahoma, where members of the Osage Nation accrued oil rights, which contributed substantial wealth for them and their white custodians. If you didn't read Killers of the Flower Moon when it was running for One Book, One Lincoln, I highly recommend it. But what about Junius Groves? He had unfettered success, right? Like the Osage and the Greenwood community in Tulsa, Groves established himself and obtained more wealth than most Black people, culminating in his reign over his potato kingdom before his death in 1925. As I read the story of Junius G., I was comforted by the thought that he had somehow managed to prosper without harassment. After all, there was not even a soft mention of any obstacles presented by his having been a Black man. Minimal research revealed that the reason he had occasion to build 3 different homes was that each home he built was mysteriously burned. He built back bigger. He perfected his farming methods. He kept going. Much like the lag in investigating the Tulsa Race Massacre, it would be 100 years before Grove Center in Edwardsville, Kansas, commemorated his accomplishment. This is a small sampling of the responses to the hard-won success of people of color by my white ancestors under the influence of white supremacy. It doesn't hurt me to claim them, or as Dr. Amanda Kemp of Racial Justice from the Heart puts it, to stand in for them when I engage in conversations about racial justice. More and more, I find that it is healing to do so. More and more, I find myself able to engage the hearts and minds of those of my people whom I had previously counted lost, not worth engaging with, deserving of disparagement, even hatred. Remember what happened in 2018 when the General Assembly of our faith was just down the road in Kansas City? More than 50 of us made the trek, and Oscar, as our freshly ordained minister, was fielding questions about how we had managed such a level of participation. This fall and spring, nearly the same number participated in Beloved Conversations, a deep dive into self-discovery and self-love around race. Another important shared experience of learning how to be better ancestors. This year, General Assembly will be online, as it was last year, and our slate of delegates is not yet finalized. The cost is $200 for 5 days of amazing programming, transformative programming. I hope you will consider registering and join me in this critical time of learning and unlearning. Stacey Abrams and Desmond Meade are the WARE co-lecturers this year. The Saturday after the 2020 presidential election, comedian Dave Chappelle hosted SNL, as he had done 4 years prior after the 2016 presidential election. You may or may not know that his mother is a UU minister. He had this to say, edited for Sunday morning, not Saturday. You guys aren't ready. You're not ready for this. You don't know how to survive yourselves. Black people, we're the only ones that know how to survive this. Whites, come, hurry quick. You need us. You need our eyes to save you from yourselves. I say amen to that.
I keep taking Christine's pen, so I'm leaving it here. Each week we take up an offering to support the work of this congregation and our partners in the world. Because we are still in the midst of an ongoing pandemic, our practice is not to pass an offering plate at this time. However, and I'm still getting used to this, but it's getting easier every week I say it, you can pull out your cell phones in worship and text UC Lincoln to 73256 with the amount you wish to give. That's UC Lincoln and 73256. The offering will now be gratefully received.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
From the essay, Love is the Practice of Freedom, in the book Outlaw Culture, Resisting Representations by Bell Hooks, published in 1994. Without love, our efforts to liberate ourselves and our world community from oppression and exploitation are doomed. As long as we refuse to address fully the place of love in struggles for liberation, we will not be able to create a culture of conversion where there is a mass turning away from an ethic of domination. Until we are able to accept the interlocking, interdependent nature of systems of domination and recognize specific ways each system is maintained, we will continue to act in ways that undermine our individual quest for freedom and collective liberation. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination, against oppression. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move towards freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others. That action is the testimony of love as the practice of freedom. Go in peace.